It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice live, right here, right now. Hey, thanks for joining with us. I appreciate it. Boy, there's some stuff going on this morning we're going to catch up on. I see a bunch of you folks out there catching our program live on our streaming feed, video feed. Shortly, by the way, we should be broadcasting our video feed on the Constitution Club. If you'd like to visit that group and join on there, they have an outstanding program where they have a little micro website for every county out of the 32 or 3,300 counties in the United States. Each county has its own little website. Great place for like-minded individuals to meet who are also close in proximity so that you can work together. The website is constitutionclub.ning.com. That's constitutionclub.ning, like Ning, November, N for November, ning.com. Keith Broaders is the purveyor of that site. Good site. Member over there myself. Encourage you to participate and join with that if at all possible. And you'll shortly be able to catch AVN there live on video. If you're not a member of Patriot FB yet, you should be. Patriot FB, like Foxtrot Bravo. Make sure that you participate with that website as well. Another alternative to the Facebook censorship world and a way to get away from all the trolls. So there's some other great programs, by the way, that play on there, including J.J. McCartney's show. He plays after 2 o'clock. And from 2 to 4 p.m., and then 10 to 11, right after AVN, is Resurrect the Republic with Tom. So make sure that you have an opportunity to listen to Patriot Radio there and educate and participate and be a part of the game. You know, if you're not participating and you're not aware of what's going on around you, that's the purpose of alternative media. For those of you that aren't aware, I talked to you the other day about the Comcast merger, which will merge Comcast and Time Warner together. For the record, there are only 6 major corporations that affect everything that you see, hear, read, and know about. Shortly, that will be down to 5, which makes alternative media all the more pressing for you to find good, constant sources and make sure that you have the wherewithal and the ability to be educated about what's happening around you. You're never going to get that out of mainstream media, folks, ever. I mean, I watch mainstream news organizations because I use them as fodder for this program. But outside of that, I don't watch television at all. And I got to tell you, what they're telling you is absolute bald-faced lies. And they're utilizing their reach into your home to mislead, misdirect, and to, quite frankly, confuse you, to present a swirl of chaos from which you cannot extricate yourself to find out and learn truth. Trust me, you will serve yourself well by finding great alternative media sites, some of which we have listed at americasvoicenow.org. All right, our topics this morning. ATF to use drones, as per Eric Holder. What? The ATF is now going to begin using drones? Drones for what? I mean, what are they going to do? Start sniffing around your barn now to see whether or not or fly around with FLIR radar and see whether you've got an AR-15 buried in your backyard in Connecticut because you refuse to register it, or in New York State? I mean, what kind of a totalitarian little gulag camp are we allowing our country to become? Really, ask yourself that question. If you don't see the danger inherent in what's happening around us, I'm not sure what you're waiting for. It's pretty obvious that things are completely and totally out of control. Our next topic this morning, we'll go on to talk about that with Last Man Standing. This is in reference to the rancher out in Nevada where armed feds have surrounded their farm. They are stealing and confiscating their cattle. They are threatening the family at gunpoint. They have snipers sitting up on the hillocks around their ranch watching and monitoring them. They've got a fleet of helicopters that are constantly flying around their ranch. This is the Bureau of Land Management and the EPA going after them, and they've been going after them for a couple decades now, over a turtle. A turtle. Yes. The environmental terrorists and the enviro tyrants are using the EPA and the Bureau of Land Management as a weapon against American citizens. Frankly, I'll tell you what, I don't care about polls running around saying we passed a law that says this or that. I don't care about enviro tyrants using the law as a weapon to protect some kind of turtle. I don't care about government claiming self-appointed power to make rules and laws that are null and void on their face. This is and should be the shot heard across America. It's time for us, Americans, to take a stand. No more running, no more fear, no more cowering in darkness, hoping that the Frankenstein that we've created and allowed to grow won't come by and eat us. That's the truth, folks. It's time for you, as an American citizen, to take a stand. You can do so by monkey-wrenching this project. You can monkey-wrench this and begin your partisan activity now. We may die in this fight, folks, but I got to tell you, it's better to die on our feet than to die on our knees, begging tyrants that we look at with abject horror for a life that's not worth living. Does that sound harsh to you? Good. It should be, because you have been asleep and you need a wake-up call to educate you about exactly how exigent and dire our circumstances are. Hello? Do you even know that we have turned into a totalitarian police state in literally the last 10 years? Our third topic, the China crisis. You know, the media is not talking about this because they don't want to panic the cattle. But China has warned that it cannot be contained. Chuck Hagel was out there yesterday. He toured a new aircraft carrier they've created. Chuck Hagel is the U.S. Defense Secretary. And China actually turned right around and looked at him and said, "You cannot contain us." If you don't smell the raw aggression coming off of China like the smell of defecation in the air, if you don't understand and recognize that what's going to happen here is when the global economy comes to a screeching halt, that there's going to be 100 million yellow Chinamen pouring into our border looking to take over the resources that we have here, you're a fool. You're either blinded by greed, stupidity, or ideology. And I don't really care which. The truth is, they'll pay any price to have the resources that we have. They need the resources we have. And now that they've sucked all the money out of the country, now they want the resources. Yes, the oil, the gas, the natural resources, the metals underground, the workers, that would be you. And by the way, they will pay any price to get that. That'll include your demise and death. Don't think it's possible here? Think again. You can toss off your utopian fantasy of a world full of brotherly love by a bunch of people who don't act like that. That's 19th century thinking, according to our idiots in government. What's coming is going to be so catastrophic, and that you have no concept of what it's going, and the danger that it's placing all of mankind to, and it will be deadly to America. You can continue to deceive yourself if you so choose, but it will not make the situation better. It will not make the situation more tenable. The truth is, we're in big trouble. In addition to that, our fourth topic will be Obamacare shuts down health insurance for a year. Okay, so let's understand something. The premise behind Obamacare was that everyone was going to be insured. No one would be stopped from having insurance because of poverty. No one would be blocked from insurance because of their ability to, or their pre-existing conditions. All of it was a lie. And now we find, and there's conflicting arguments out there, because some say you can't buy insurance from any entity now at all until next January. So what happens to a guy who didn't buy insurance because he couldn't get into the website or because he chose not to, or a family, and suddenly one of their children gets sick? And I thought the premise, according to Hussein Obama, was that no American family should ever go bankrupt over medical bills. Well, how are you going to stop that, Barack? When someone's family member gets sick and their child is diagnosed with leukemia, they have no insurance, and now they're barred from even buying insurance. What kind of a nightmare have you created for us? The truth is, ladies and gentlemen, it's never been about covering you for insurance. It's never been about protecting American families. It's never been about protecting you. It's all about control. It's all about making you recognize that you do not have the ability, the wherewithal, or the right to make a decision for yourself without first approving it with government. That you cannot live without being dependent 100% totally on them. If you don't believe that, you have been indoctrinated. Let's get into our first topic. Eric Holder, who came out yesterday in a justice hearing at the House, actually had the unmitigated gall, first and foremost, to say that the Justice Department and the President have a, quote, vast amount of discretion in how they prosecute federal law. His remarks during this testimony was just stunning to me. Bob Goodlatte, the chairman, who runs this particular committee, he was talking about a couple of areas, including marijuana legalization issues in Colorado and Washington State, criminal sentencing, and how they are basically telling prosecutors, if you caught the guy with 2 ounces of cocaine, don't charge him with 2 ounces, because that will require, under mandatory minimum sentencing laws, that he get 20 years. Charge him with a half ounce of that 2 ounces you found, and then that way he'll only get 5 or 10 years. I'm going to get into why that's a problem in a moment. But more importantly, this also deals with the president's changing of the rules and the law as he goes along under dictatorial fiat rule. Bob Goodlatte said to him, he asked Holder whether he believed there were any limits to the administration's prosecutorial discretion. By the way, this also goes to the immigration issue. Here was Holder's answer. There is a vast amount of discretion that a president has, and more specifically than an attorney general has. But that discretion has to be used in an appropriate way so that you're acting consistent with the aims of the statute, but at the same time, making sure that you are acting in a way that is consistent with our values, consistent with the Constitution, and protecting the American people. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the most ridiculous non-answer I've ever heard. One, you don't have discretion as to whether or not you will follow a law that's already existing in place. Number one, the president swears an oath to faithfully execute the law, as does the attorney general, right? So you don't have a question. It's not a question of whether or not you will or will not follow and execute the law. Secondly, you don't have the ability to use prosecutorial discretion consistent with the aims of the statute, but at the same time making sure you're acting in a way consistent with our values. Whose values? Eric Holder's personal value? Barack Obama's personal value? Valerie Jarrett's personal value? Whose values? That's what I want to know. You see, that's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. You have subjective people instead of objective rule of law. That's the problem. And frankly, I don't want to live under Eric Holder's values. I don't want to live under the values of Kathleen Sebelius and the HHS. I don't want to live under the values of Jay Johnson from the Department of Homeland Security or the values of the guy who runs the ATF. Those are not values I ascribe to. Those are not values that rule my life. Those are not values that I will set my sights upon or my life upon. The truth is, that what we have is no longer the rule of law in this nation. We have a rule of might makes right. And of course, the challenge there is that the might is in the hands of people that are, for all intents and purposes, diametrically opposed to the principles of our founding documents, our founding and foundational creation of this nation in the first place. That's the problem, folks. Now, furthermore, he came out. Let me finish with this claim about his nonsense with the what he can and cannot follow under the law, because he cited, because this is important, he cited that the administration's decision to no longer defend the Defense of Marriage Act was prohibited, which prohibited same-sex couples from receiving federal benefits and so forth. And Goodlatte came back and said to him, all of this demonstrates a pattern on the part of the Obama administration to ignore or rewrite the very legislation that places limits on the executive branch authority for purely political purposes. See, there's another point that Goodlatte made here, and I want to just bring it out to you. Goodlatte said, the Justice Department's decision not to enforce the Controlled Substances Act in states whose laws violate federal law is not a valid exercise of prosecutorial discretion, but a formal department-wide policy of selective non-enforcement of an act of Congress. You see, he's making the point here where you cannot have a rule of law when it's interpreted and applied under the rules of individuals like Eric Holder, who are ideologues at their very best and traitors at their worst. I don't want a nation. I don't want to live in a nation. I don't want my children to grow up in a nation. I don't want a nation that selectively prosecutes, not based on whether or not it's right or there's any justice associated with this, but based upon someone else's skewed version of social justice, of racial justice, by a man who's clearly a racist. Goodlatte talked about the fact of these mandatory minimum judicial sentences. And he said the Attorney General's directive, and this is in reference to the idea of don't charge him with 3 pounds of marijuana because that'll give him a 25-year sentence. Charge him with, and it's a nonviolent crime, charge him with 1 pound of marijuana, right? Here's the problem with that, folks. And Goodlatte made the point well, but I'm going to expound on it. He says the Attorney General's directive, well, let me back up and explain to you what the directive is. The directive is don't charge them with the full amount of dope because otherwise they're going to go to jail for a much longer time, right? And so his comment was the Attorney General's directive, along with contradicting an act of Congress, puts his own frontline prosecutors in the unenviable position of either defying their boss or violating their oath of candor to the court. Bingo. Here's what he's saying. You not only have an obligation to follow the rule that I've given you, but I'm telling you to break the law, number one, and number two, I'm telling you to lie to the court. Quite honestly, if I were a defendant in that court, the first thing I would do is I would dismiss my attorney and I would look at the jury and I would say, ladies and gentlemen, I was not caught with 1 pound of marijuana. I was caught with 3 pounds of marijuana. And this prosecutor is lying to the court in an attempt to try to keep my sentence reduced. Therefore, I move for the court to dismiss this case entirely because the prosecutor has been lying and misrepresenting the truth to the court. In my favor, granted, but still, a misrepresentation nonetheless, and therefore a lie. Therefore, you cannot trust anything that this prosecutor says because he's already established and proven that he's a liar to the court that he represents. Eric Holder also came out and said that the ATF will now begin using drones for domestic law enforcement and surveillance. Really? What are we going to do? Fly them around with FLIR radar and look for Charlie, who might have buried an AR-15 in a tube in his backyard? Or maybe he's got a still in his backyard to produce gasoline that he can run his own farm vehicles and tractors and automobiles on? Poe from Texas questioned Holder during a House committee meeting, asking the Attorney General if we believe the FAA or Congress should regulate drone use. And that's when Holder came out and dropped the bomb. Within the department, he would not specifically answer the question, by the way, which is Eric Holder's mantra. He never answers a question. He avoids it. But what he did say was, within the department, the only component that uses these vehicles at this point is the FBI. The ATF is in the process of working through to see if they want to make use of them. He went on to state that, I think it would be the appropriate thing to do, talking about using drones for surveillance, domestic surveillance. And we are in the process of trying to work through what rules and regulations would handle the use of these kinds of vehicles. You see, here's the problem, folks. I don't want to be under any rule that Eric Holder makes, because there's not a single rule that Eric Holder makes that has the best interests or the true interests of either the United States of America or the citizens within it, or anyone who is not either a member of his party or a member of his color. Eric Holder is a traitor. Every word and deed out of his mouth is an act of treason. And I got to tell you, America, you're either shortly going to get your poop together and you're going to remove this guy, irrespective of what Congress says and the law says and everybody else says, or we're going to go down the road and end up in a gulag state that's going to change the very, very nature of everything that you know and see and think and hear and do. We can't let this go on much longer. And there is zero hope of Congress acting. There is zero hope of the judiciary acting, because they're all in cahoots. They're all in cooperation together. Mark my words. This is the demise of America that we have feared for the last 225 years. And it is happening right around us right now. And most of America is ignoring it. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Last Man Standing, the rancher standoff in Nevada that may well be the new shot heard around the world. This may supersede the Connecticut thing, because it looks like Connecticut has finally wisened up and they're going to back off the idea of confiscating firearms. Now they're stealing this guy's cattle. They arrested his son the other day. They've instituted these ridiculous constitutional free speech zones. Yes, zones. A fenced-in area where you're lucky they allow you to redress your grievances with your government. I beg to differ, but we fought a revolution over that the last time, and we should fight another one over it now. We'll be back in just a minute. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org. You can also find us on facebook.com/America's Voice Now. You can also find every video that we do and every episode that we put up in both this podcast and audio format and video format at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We'll be right back. All right, we return as promised. You know, the issues of where we are on this rancher in Nevada should be clear to everyone involved. That what we are seeing before us right now, where the feds are deploying snipers surrounding a family's home, this is the next Waco. This is the next. Essentially, the next Ruby Ridge that we're going to see here in the United States. And frankly, I think it's about time that we recognize that unless we do something as a collective group of Americans to make it clear that we rule this nation and this government, we will soon have to acquiesce and accept and publicly acknowledge that we have lost all control of our government and that, frankly, it no longer serves us and we serve it. The Mayopa Valley Progress reported that Dave Bundy, he's the son of the rancher of Cliven Bundy, was arrested after he took photographs of the federal cattle theft, frankly, the rustling that they've been doing. He's got 900 cattle. For the record, just so you understand the background of this thing, this guy has been ranging his cattle on this federal, on what has now become federal land, but originally was county land up until 1993. In 1993, the Bureau of Land Management took the property over from the county of Clark County, Nevada, and the enviro tyrants out there have been screaming bloody murder to protect some kind of a desert tortoise that apparently can be found on the land that they classify as endangered, which I don't believe because there's never any scientific backing for that. All it is just is subjective nonsense. This guy's got 900 cattle. They are confiscating 600 of them. With beef at an all-time high, I can only imagine what the cost of that is to the family. This is not the only guy that's been going through this. I saw an episode the other day on one of the Fox exposés about government overreach, where they were talking about another rancher who's been fighting this for the last 30 years in court. They've been fighting it so long, the father died and the mother died while they were in the midst of the fight, and the son has taken it over. By the way, for the record, they've won in court every time, but the federal government just keeps coming back at them over and over and over and over and over and over and over 100 different ways. Now, they've arrested this guy for filming because he was outside of a First Amendment zone. Now, I'm going to tell you something. This was something that was passed a couple of years ago, and America pretended it didn't matter. They didn't even realize that it was being done. And the First Amendment zone thing has effectively barred us from ever being able to even have an opportunity to redress our grievances with our government. For those of you that aren't aware of what that is, they have set up these areas where if you want to protest, as an example, you're only allowed to protest in an area which they classify as a First Amendment free speech zone. Well, I got to tell you, free speech is not limited to a zone, number one. Number two, the fact that they are trying to bar us from the redress of our grievances against our government was what we fought a revolutionary war over. And it's time for us to begin to, again, water the tree of liberty with the blood of our nation. Sheriff Mack has come out and said that it's lamentable that Clark County has a sheriff who will not keep his oath of office and stand up to support this family and this particular guy. The sheriff who has control even over and above these the federal agencies that are involved here refuses to step in the middle of this. He refuses to say, you're ordered off this property. He has the right to, he has the jurisdiction to do so, and he will not do it. Now, they're stealing his cattle, and they're using armed helicopter raids, and they are flying helicopters around his home. They've got snipers sitting up on a hillside. They've already arrested his son. They beat the snot out of him. There's a picture of him on the web, and he's got these red marks all over his face because he was filming outside of their free speech zone. I got to ask you, America, at what point in time are you going to say enough's enough? Or at what point in time are you going to say, this has reached a point where we're out of control, that we've allowed the government to exceed its control and that they are now classifying us as an enemy of the state, that we have become the slave to the master of the state. If you're not willing to look at it for what it truly is, then, I can't understand why you can't see it that way. This family, and I've been talking about monkey wrenching this thing, because if you're unemployed or you are retired, I don't know why you're not packing up your duds right now to drive out there and participate. Militias have been alerted all over the country. This is going to turn into a serious situation if it's not unwound quickly. And frankly, I think I'm just as soon it would at this point, because I think everybody needs to I think we all need to know where everybody stands. I think we need to bring this thing to a head and make it clear that we, America, are in control. The people are in control, and we're going to take our government back by force of arms if necessary. That is a dangerous statement, because in today's political environment, you can be ostracized, charged, classified as a terrorist, a domestic terrorist for saying such a thing. But I'm only reiterating what our founders said to us to do. They're not my words, they're their words. These aren't my words that I'm making up. This isn't me inciting anyone to violence. I'm not doing such a thing. What I am saying is that our founders have given us the tools and the knowledge and the understanding of what we need to do when our government is operating in tyranny. And no one who's intellectually honest at this point can deny that that's where we are. You see, what we see and what we have right now is a government that is operating not of and by and for the people, but it's a government that interprets the Constitution in a way that grants itself power, benefits the corporations that fund it, and I don't mean fund it, but fund it via corruption, fund the corruption of it, and improves the situation for entities and the wealthy and the corporations who, frankly, have bought and paid everyone involved. We now have in front of us a government of wolves. And these wolves are sitting about deciding which sheep they're going to eat for dinner. They shoot unarmed citizens at will, with impunity and immunity. They punish and target any American who attempts to defend or protect themselves. They have accessed our communications, all of our activities. They operate in secret. They hold secret hearings to decide your fate. They have secret agendas. When pressured or pressed for information about what their intentions are, everything now is a national secret. This is not the representative government that our founders gave us. It's not the one they designed. It's not the one they built and created. It's not the one that God has given to us. It's not the one that natural law has dictated we have the right to live under. We can no longer claim to be the masters of this nation. We are now slaves. We're subjected to for all intents and purposes, the militarization of a corporatocracy which is interested only in one thing from you: what you are as a resource for their betterment and the benefits and the privileges of a very, very small minority. And they're using your money to do so, which is Completely unbelievable. I got to tell you, it's reached a point where we can no longer sit around and pretend it's not happening. I know that's what most people want to do. And they want to do that because acknowledging it means that they have to then take action to end it. There was a time when our forebears and our forefathers declared that they'd reached the point of no return. That the government that was ruling them was illegitimate, tyrannical, abusive, dangerous. They stopped paying their taxes. They took up arms. They acted as partisans in their own homeland. They refused to see their ability to self-govern be stolen and taken from them. They held those accountable with or without a rule or a law that would allow them to do so. They did so as partisans. That's only our history. We've seen it many, many, many times throughout history in other nations as well. When a nation was invaded by oppressors from outside, and they had participants within their own nation that betrayed their country, those partisans would remove them from the equation. But our government is no longer held accountable. It's no longer held accountable for the crimes against the people. Open, blatant treason. Open, blatant terrorism. Tyranny. Abuse. Murder. We have reached a point in time where we must make a decision. Were we to have made these decisions earlier on, some time ago, we could have avoided what now appears almost inevitable. But we didn't. And for whatever reason, I guess because humanity is, for the most part, I mean, I get it in the sense that people, for the most part, are always looking to procrastinate, right? I mean, nobody wants to have to make the decision. And I get it. I understand that. Nobody wants to resort to violence to achieve the retaking of our government and the putting it back. And frankly, I got a question. I mean, what are we going to do with all the people that, for all intents and purposes, would not fit in a government of self-governance, would not fit in a framework, a societal framework that says you must be independent because you're on your own? It's no one else's obligation to coddle you, take care of you, pay for you, that you are responsible for your actions, that you are responsible for the things which you do or don't do, that you stand alone. And it's one thing when people are willing to help you because they see potential in you and they know that it's a short-term helping hand. But it's another thing when it becomes something that is stolen from them in order to enable you. If we don't have the right to decide for ourselves what we can do, who we can engage in commerce with, whether we even want to engage in commerce, whether we can choose our own elected officials, that we can choose to be left alone if that's what we so choose. If we don't have the right to decide that our privacy is valuable to us and that we're entitled to retain that, then we don't really have any rights at all. And you can't take one right away and say that you are free. You cannot limit the free speech and have the First Amendment stand. You cannot limit the religious practices of an individual and still have the First Amendment stand. You cannot limit the ownership of one type of weapon and have the Second Amendment stand. You cannot say that your privacy is yours until we decide that it's in the best interest of the nation for you not to have any, and have the Fourth Amendment have any meaning whatsoever. You cannot have a Fifth Amendment that guarantees that you cannot be coerced into making a statement against your own best interest, while the coercion is on of a plea agreement that says, if you don't agree to this plea, we will give you a sentence so harsh it far outweighs any potential crime that you may have committed. That is coercion. That is forcing you to violate your Fifth Amendment right. Yes, you can take it to trial, but they've already stated very emphatically and clearly that as a result of that, we're going to retract the 3-year or the 5-year or the 10-year sentence we've offered you, and we're now going to go after a 20 or 30 or 50-year sentence. Is that not coercion of your Fifth Amendment right? Where is our Sixth Amendment right to a trial by jury when you are heard by administrative agency law judges with no jury associated to it? You're heard by one person who, by the way, owes his allegiance to the very agency which you're fighting against. Is that not a conflict of interest? Show me any justification for that in the Sixth Amendment. What constitutes cruel and unusual punishment? I would posit that what constitutes cruel and unusual punishment is the theft of a man's cattle to protect a turtle. Hundreds and hundreds of officers surrounding with weapons drawn, snipers, armed aircraft, and he hasn't even been convicted of anything. I would posit that that qualifies as cruel and unusual punishment. Our states, under the 10th Amendment, they have completely abdicated their responsibility to us and to their own sovereignty. Our leaders, our alleged so-called leaders in state assemblies, they have become inebriated with the power. We have no rights left because they can take from us what they want when they want. They can use it in any way, shape, and form that they choose, including against you. The resources, the very resources stolen from you, can be used against you. We cannot claim to be free men and women. We cannot claim this to be the land of the free. And apparently we can't claim it to be the home of the brave either. Because brave Americans would have risen up a long time ago and reclaimed their freedom. We have now become peasants and serfs in the land which our forefathers, and not so forefathers, recently died to give us. Jefferson made it clear that that would be the result of bankers and a central banking system. He told us that if we allowed bankers to create a monetary system that could be swayed and that would be manipulated based on a boom and a bust principle, inflation and deflation, we would shortly wake up bankrupt in the land that our forefathers had conquered. Ladies and gentlemen, you may not be awake yet, but we're already there. What's happening out there in Nevada is only one example. But it should not go unchallenged. Frankly, American citizens should be going out there, every retiree, every person who is retired should be going out there armed and going out there with the intent to arrest the people, the 200 people, the pilots, the police officers, the agents of the BLM. They have no authority. Authority based on what? Where did we grant Congress the power to subdelegate our authority to unnamed, unaccountable federal agencies who don't even have and have never taken an oath to protect and defend this nation? You think some representative, some pencil-neck typist in the BLM takes an oath of office to protect and defend you in this Constitution, in this nation? You're sorely mistaken. And if they did, they would be violating it. If you are not immediately involved with the necessity of food, feeding and clothing your own family, then you should be on your way to Nevada. And if necessary, we should make this the new last stand for freedom and liberty in the nation. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we will tackle our third topic, the China crisis. They've come right out and said we will not be contained by the United States or anyone else. And they are bent on worldwide domination. Make no mistake about it. They are engineering, participating, and hoping and plotting for our collapse. And when you think, or if you think, that they will not be the first ones invading our shores, you're mistaken. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Please make sure that you work with our sponsors. These are the folks that keep this program on the air all the time. I would invite you and encourage you to participate with them and work with them as a purveyor of goods and services that will not only benefit you, but also make sure that they keep this program alive. Wits End Classic Barbershop at 417-372-2027, located on the square in West Plains. Great hair shave and a haircut. You can get a haircut over there for $10. They do the old-style shave with the straight razor and the whole 9 yards. Patriot Cigar and Tobacco Shop at 417-257-1776, where you can, they've got every product, tobacco product that there is out there. Participate with them, and please make sure that you are working with them as well. The law offices of Jason Henry. If you've got a legal challenge in your life, please give him a call. He'll be able to assist you. 417-256-4100. That's 417-256-4100. Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard in West Plains. They have their special Easter basket for a $1 donation to the American Cancer Society. Your name is thrown into the hat for a drawing of 2 baskets worth, I don't even know, like $100 or something. And then last but not least is Battery Station. BatteryStation.com, 417-257-7799.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You're joining us in our third of four segments. So far this morning, we've covered the ATF and the treason of Eric Holder and how the ATF is planning to use drones for domestic surveillance. You know, for all of those people that are naysayers out there and keep saying, well, they're not going to do that, how many times do you have to be disproven? How many times does your utopian fantasy have to be dashed to the ground to make you recognize the danger that this nation is in? Our second topic was Last Man Standing, the rancher standoff in Nevada. You know, the family that is being accosted out there in Clark County, Nevada, I got to tell you, it is on a level of criminality and every American who has the wherewithal and the capability to get out there should be doing so. There should be such a massive protest that the ranch should be surrounded. The entire BLM area should be surrounded 5 deep by Americans locking elbows and standing against federal tyranny. Arrest the BLM individuals. Arrest the individuals from the EPA. Arrest them all. Arrest them. There is a thing called citizen's arrest, and we should be using it. Now Chuck Hagel, and this topic is going to be the China crisis. Chuck Hagel had the Chinese give him a proverbial slap in the face when they turned around and said to him that they will not be contained. He went over there with the idea of touring an aircraft carrier, and his goal was to create a, quote, framework to manage competition. What? Now, you see, if two companies said that, let's assume Coke and Pepsi said that they were going to have a meeting to manage competition, that would be construed as a violation of antitrust. But you got Chuck Hagel, the representative of the United States of America for defense, not for commerce, for defense, going over there and trying to cut a deal to manage competition. And we're going over there with a weakened hand, with a position not of strength, but of capitulation. Cowering. Empty threats. Shameful. The Chinese have orchestrated this and played Hagel and us over this issue. They've been playing us for decades, since Nixon's day. Economically, politically. Hagel toured their first aircraft carrier, the first produced aircraft carrier they've made. And their defense minister looked right at him and warned him and said, not even the United States can contain our military ambition. Wow. Think about that for a moment. Just think about that statement for a moment. If you don't smell the raw aggression that comes off of this nation, China, like the putrid smell of defecation that's wafting through the air, like the smell of death, you're blinded by either your greed, your stupidity, your ideology, or your utopian fantasies. Make no mistake that when this all comes down, there'll be a few hundred million yellow Chinamen. And they will be looking for the resources on this continent to rape and pillage it for the improvement of those at home. They will pay any price to attain them, including your death. I strongly encourage America, average Americans, because our government won't do it. They have already made their peace and play with the devil. But I encourage you to toss off the utopian fantasy of world peace. Unlike President Obama's statement and Angela Merkel from Germany, who couched Vladimir Putin and insulted him with the juvenile argument that you're acting like a 19th century tyrant. The world is full of tyrants. It's full of aggressive psychopaths. It's full of men and women hungry for power and money, not the least of which our government is among. You need to toss off the utopian fantasy of a world full of brotherly love. What's coming and what's going to happen between the United States and China will be catastrophic and deadly to not only America, but probably all of mankind on a global scale. China is acquiring real estate, massive chunks of real estate, not only in major cities. They're buying up farmland. They're buying up food production companies. They're buying up ranches. They're buying up mining resources and mining rights, all in the United States of America. And they're using our money to do it because we have a $300 billion deficit every year. $300 billion leaves our shores that never comes back every year. And it's been going on for 35 or 40 years. We have funded our enemy. They are our enemy, make no mistake about it. China is looking to become the lone superpower, and they will take our resources to accomplish that. They've already taken our money. They've taken most of our jobs. And if our own government doesn't beat them to it, out of their greed and stupidity, they'll probably be the thing that launches our collapse. But the Chinese will be willing to finish it. If you don't think that there will be a few hundred million yellow hordes landing upon our shores and turning you and your family into worker bees to feed the Chinese growth, then you don't really understand the depth of depravity of the mind of humans. This is bold, cold talk. I get it. Most people don't want to hear that. They blow it off. That's not true. I mean, that can't happen in our civilized world. We have iPads. What kind of a damn fool are you to think that? You know, in the 30s and 40s, in the early 1900s, we had this brand new invention called the automobile. I mean, how civilized could we be? We don't have to ride those sweaty, smelly horses anymore. That can't happen. Oh, you short-sighted utopian fantasist. They have been working on methodology and means to destroy the United States of America. And think how easy it would be to simply toss an EMP. It's not a nuclear weapon. There will be no fallout from radiation. But just lob one a couple of 100,000 kilometers above the planet, above the United States, and shut it down. Put a virus into the grid that won't do lasting permanent damage, but will darken the United States of America for the next 3 years. They would have the only means and methodology of replacing the equipment they've damaged, and they would have military and political superiority that would come with it. If you really think that China doesn't think that way, you've been living in your little county too long, and you have not explored or expounded your mind to look at what the world is really like. General Chang Wanquan said, "With the latest developments in China, it can never be contained. The U.S. is a country of worldwide influence, and the Pacific Ocean is huge enough to hold both China and the U.S. for common development, and also huge enough to hold the other Asia-Pacific countries. But if you missed the cue, I want you to listen to his first sentence again. With the latest developments in China, it can never be contained." Need you be reminded of that same mindset from Japan prior to World War II? Hegel went over there to manage competition between the U.S. and China. He also went over there to give other countries in the area the assurance that somebody was there to keep them safe from China stomping all over them with jackboots. But he failed. And he failed because, irrespective of how strong his words may have been, the actions of the United States speak volumes compared to their pathetic sentences. They've been cyber attacking us, ladies and gentlemen, for over a decade. They have infiltrated our banking systems. Yes, the Federal Reserve that thinks they're so secure, don't even go there. They have infiltrated our utility systems. They have infiltrated our military. They have set up territorial disputes to test the waters. They use North Korea as a little brother to test the resolve of the United States of America. Like a little brother, like a drug dealer on the streets who uses his little brother to mule and carry all the dope. He makes the deal, but the little brother carries it. And that's so that if they are arrested, the little brother will only get a slap on the wrist because he's a juvenile, and he can be caught with a pound of dope, and it's not going to really change his life. He's going to get out of reform school when he's 18. And the big brother knows it. So he enlists the little brother to carry and do all the real muling of the dirt. China uses North Korea just like that. They are replacing us in Africa as the go-to for peace and stability. They're replacing us in South America as the go-to for peace and stability. They've already replaced us in most of the rest of Asia. They're actively working on the Middle East, which already hate us. They trade weapons of mass destruction with our sworn enemies. They threaten us right to our face. And we turn around and look back at our own population and say, come on, they're just kidding. Yeah, they're just kidding us. No, they're not. We have lost the influence in the region. We've lost the influence everywhere else. They're using this issue of these two islands that are in dispute between Japan and China as a means to test us and test our commitment to Japan. The hatred between Japan and China is age-old. And Japan has been guilty of terrible atrocities against the Chinese. If you don't know your world history, well, that's on you. Go do your own homework and due diligence. Don't take my word for it. Just go look it up. They have threatened us away from Taiwan, who we committed to preserve. We betrayed them after World War II, and now we've betrayed them again. They have us fearful of them. Your representatives and your elected officials in Washington turn around with a strong, bold face to you and give you the assurance that they've got this all in control. But when they turn around to face China to negotiate, they approach from a position of weakness. And the Chinese know it. Hagel spews words at them, and they laugh. He says, I will be talking with the Chinese about its respect for their neighbors. You cannot go around the world and redefine boundaries and violate territorial integrity and the sovereignty of nations by force, coercion, or intimidation, whether it's in small islands in the Pacific or large nations in Europe. Tough talk from a pussy. And that's essentially what we are. We are a paper tiger. And they know it. Worse yet, their plans include it. We have allowed China to influence everything about our nation to the detriment of our nation and their benefit. This posturing of tough talk, but actions that belie your real, true strength and or intentions is foolish. This idea of the Obama administration and the Bush administration and the Clinton and the Bush before him of abandoning the principle of peace through strength will be for sure the demise of the United States of America on an international political arena. Our foreign policy is in tatters. Every foreign policy issue out there has literally collapsed. Not a single one. And I got to tell you, most of them were based on some kind of cooperation from Russia. And now that we're in a nose-to-nose, foam-spitting contest with Putin, all of them have evaporated into nothing but smoke. These people who call themselves our representatives are incompetent, inept, treasonous, traitorous, greedy, pathetic, and we've allowed them to buffalo us long enough. It's time to remove them, all of them, and reassert and reestablish this nation as the basic foundational pool and the well of liberty and freedom and strength. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about Obamacare shutting down health insurance across the country for the next 9 months. If that's what Obamacare was all about, forcing you to buy when they say you can buy, while you're being forced at the point of a gun to buy, it's even more unconstitutional than we thought. We'll be right back. Please make sure that you visit batterystation.com, one of our sponsors. Battery Station is an outstanding place for any kind of electronic and batteries, flashlights, and that kind of electronic gear. They ship nationally. BatteryStation.com. You can also call them at 417-256-4100 if you have a need for any locally. They carry ammunition. They carry all kinds of survival and bug out gear material. They carry Spring Creek beef in a freezer in their facility there. So if you're local and you want to purchase all natural beef, they carry it there, and you can take advantage of it there. The Battery Station also carries our food co-op program. So if you go in there and you say to them that we would like to see the food co-op catalog that Mike talked about on America's Voice Now, they'll hand you a catalog where you can buy bulk food at wholesale prices, not retail, wholesale. You'll save between 30 and 50% at minimum on your food bill. We'll be right back. All right. We return. Thanks so much for joining with us this morning, especially those of you folks that have joined us on our website and capturing our show streaming, either there or on Patriot FB. I encourage you to go to our Spreaker site, and where you can hit the follow button. We need followers on Spreaker because once we get over 100, we started using Spreaker, I don't know, a month and a half ago, where when we reach over 100, then we can get onto iHeartRadio utilizing our Spreaker feed, and that will dramatically increase our audience. So I encourage you to please go there, not just like it, but follow. Hit the follow button. You may even have to register, but the more people, we're at 70-something now. I don't know, maybe even 80. But the more we get, the faster we get, the faster we'll be able to get up on iTunes and iHeartRadio, and iTunes for that matter. So, which will all help to expand our audience. We've covered a lot of ground this morning. We covered the ATF using drones against American citizens for domestic surveillance, openly stated as domestic surveillance by Eric Holder. I mean, folks, how many more times do you have to hear from the murderer that they've committed the crime in their own words as a confession of guilt before you recognize how far down the rabbit hole we've fallen? We also heard him state that he has enormous leeway to violate the law and interpret it the way in which he chooses. And because he's responsible to provide legal counsel to the president, he's the one who's telling Obama it's okay for him to violate the Constitution and violate the law and pass unilateral changes to Obamacare and executive orders and whatnot. Eric Holder, the entire Justice Department, and this administration need to be removed from power. And we're either going to do it through a massive, peaceful, civil disobedient effort, or we're going to have to do it under a massive, violent effort. In our second topic, we talked about last man standing, the rancher standoff that's going on in Nevada, where EPA and BLM and national parks police are threatening, hundreds of them, 250 of them are surrounding this family's ranch, stealing their cattle, and they've already arrested and beaten up the son. They charged him with refusing to stop videotaping them because he was outside of a First Amendment free speech zone. Hello? How insane is that? So now, if you use your free speech and exercise your free speech as an American, a free-born free man or woman, a child of God who has natural rights, you'll be arrested, beaten, your property stolen from you, imprisoned. And this is the land of the free and the home of the brave? Clearly, it's not the land of the free, and apparently not the home of the brave, because otherwise we would have violently uprisen a long time ago and shut down this tyrannical, abusive, totalitarian regime that declares itself our master in violation of everything that we know and believe. We see time after time, incident after incident, where this government operates against our best interests, for the special interests, those who have paid off and benefit from the rules and the regulations made by myriad agencies, the minions of evil. And evil this is. Make no mistake about it. Evil on a biblical level. The latest surprises from Obamacare and HHS and the traitor Sibelius, the healthcare Nazi. They've announced that now that the dates for Obamacare enrollment have passed, you'll no longer be able to buy insurance until next January. You won't be able to buy insurance until next January. Well, So the obvious comes to mind. Why didn't anyone in the media know this beforehand and tell us? With all of their investigative resources, their massive staffs, their reporters, their investigative reporters, all the discussions, all the opinions, all the talking heads, all the blathering, silence. Why didn't Republicans tell their constituents this was happening? In an effort to thwart the passage of this first thing, and secondly, in an effort to get pressure placed upon the Democrats to allow it to be repealed. Simple. They never read the bill. Why didn't Sebelius or Obama or HHS make it widely known that, the cutoff is not just in the 15th. It's not just that you're going to have to pay $95. It's that you won't be able to buy any insurance between March 31st and January 1st of 2015. So you now, as a young family, have 2 children, and you're young. You're 20. You're in your late 20s, early 30s, and you've got 2 children, and you've lost your insurance through your health care, through your employer. You've tried to sign up under Obamacare's disastrous website, could not do so. Or you found that the premiums were so outrageously expensive that you could not afford them. Now, June rolls around. One of your children is sick. You take that child to the hospital, and they say, well, what kind of insurance coverage do you have? Well, we don't. We couldn't get signed up. We tried. It was too expensive. We couldn't afford it. We couldn't afford that and to keep our home. We couldn't afford that and to pay our electric and gas bill. Well, we're going to treat your child. We're going to send you a bill. And the bill comes in and it's $120,000. And you're not entitled to go bankrupt on it because under Obamacare, they've changed the rules. And you can't buy health insurance because from March 31st straight through until January 1st of 2015, you cannot buy insurance. No one can sell you a qualified plan. Was that the real goal of Obamacare? I mean, as I recall, when the pitch was on and they were trying to tell us why we needed this, and it was, and I remember specifically the words out of the mouth of Obama, insane. He said, no American family should ever go bankrupt because of medical bills for their children. And I've just outlined for you an exact scenario in which this can and will happen. It's guaranteed to happen. There are 315 million of us in the country. Between now and January 1st, unless the media is willing to hide it from us, we will find some young family that has been destroyed, whose financial wherewithal has been wrecked, whose little piece of American pie equity in their home has been leaned on by a hospital or a doctor, where a child dies because the family cannot afford the medical care and couldn't get signed up, or couldn't afford the coverage because the premiums have risen so dramatically and starkly. You see, this was never about getting people covered. It was always about control. But now you can't have what you didn't really want, and you're going to pay dearly as a punishment. First, we're going to hold a gun to your head and threaten you to buy something, one, either you had and now lost because of their threats, or couldn't afford in the first place. Then they bar you from being able to actually obtain it without them, further cocking the gun. And this isn't a Russian roulette with a revolver with only one shell in the cylinder. This is Russian roulette with 6 bullets in a cylinder that only holds 6. They've sought to sow confusion and chaos, making everyone feel that dependency on government is the only way to truly be protected from them. You see, this is like the mob who shows up at your business and says, "We run this community, and we're the ones who protect the businesses around in the community. And you need protection because you're new. We see you've opened up here. You have a nice place." And you naively say, "But this is a good neighborhood, and I've spoken to some of the other businesses, and there's never been a robbery here, and I'm not quite sure what I need protection from. And if I have to pay you a percentage, what are you protecting me from?" And the second guy walks over to the counter, and he drags his arm across it and knocks a bunch of your product off on the ground, breaking glass and destroying the product itself. And the first guy looks back at you and smiles, and he says, "Well, you stupid. You need protection from us." This entire operation is nothing more than thugs in suits. It is La Cosa Nostra. It is mafia. It is gangland thuggery. Headquartered Washington, D.C. Headquartered in your state capital. Barred from being able to buy health insurance now on the free market. How are the principles of free market and capitalism exercised now in the land of the free and the home of the brave? Weekly Standard has an article out that says you can still buy it. So which is it? You can or cannot? HHS's own website says that you can obtain coverage after the cutoff date. But yet then they tell you otherwise, again, in another sentence. The object is to sow confusion and chaos so that everyone feels that they are dependent upon government to be truly protected from the government itself. And only by your capitulation and kowtowing and bowing and scraping can you be protected. Because the benefactor can also be the slave master. Ladies and gentlemen, this is nothing short of propaganda. It's a false flag, media false flag. An event that is designed to herd the cattle, to nudge you, to use a Cass Sunsteinism, to nudge you in a direction in which they want you to go so that you may be branded that you may be sheared, that you may be milked. If you truly cannot buy insurance outside of the ACA, Obamacare, then it's even more insidiously evil and unconstitutional than we originally thought. Because now, not only are you forced at the point of a gun to engage in commerce just to exist, just to retain your citizenship, but because you didn't do what you were told when you were told, now you will be punished. You will be ruined. You will be destroyed. You'll be punished, and you'll be unable to gain and obtain coverage, which will inevitably lead to millions going bankrupt if they get sick before the next enrollment window appears. And watch the sheep flock to the feeding trough of ACA on January 1st. Get it? They make an example of a few. Find me any justification for this kind of thinking, this kind of action, this behavior in our Constitution. I don't care how tenuous the thread. Find me any even the most tenuous example, the most tenuous justification in our Constitution, in our founders' writings, in their opinions. I bet you can't. In fact, I know you cannot. But there are many other things you can find. Here's what I see. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to, emphasis, abolish it. And to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed dictates that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient cause. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Ladies and gentlemen, you should take that phrase and the preceding phrase, and you should put that in writing, big and bold. And it should be placed every place in your home. It should be there on your nightstand so that when you awaken in the morning, you see it. And it should be hung next to your mirror so that as you are shaving in the morning or brushing your teeth, or if you're putting on your makeup, you are reading these words. It should be tucked away in your child's notebook so that when they get to their school and they're sitting at their desk and they open the notebook, there lie the words that say that we hold these truths to be self-evident. that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. We withdraw our consent. In fact, we have never given our consent. We did not consent to allow government to grant a power unauthorized, unaccountable, massive to individuals, agencies, corporations, to rob and steal, to rape and pillage our nation into submission and unto death itself. We never consented to that. And if anyone should misconstrue that we have, then we need to put them on notice that we withdraw such consent as they may have misinterpreted. The time has come for this nation to stand again on its own, and the men and women of this nation. You should be showing this to your children and explaining to them that this is what our country was born and created and designed upon. Not what you're taught. See, it's your job as a parent to enlighten the people generally, and tyranny and oppressions of body and mind will vanish like spirits at the dawn of day. And to ensure that they fully understand that, tell them that I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man. Do you fear your government? Do you cower? Then let me confirm and remind you that a single act of tyranny may be ascribed to the accidental opinion of the day. But a series of oppressions begun at a distinguished period and pursued unalterably through every change of ministers plainly proves a deliberate, systematic plan of reducing us to slavery. All tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. America. Silence is not golden. Silence is acquiescence. And in this case, silence is death. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. Please share this with those around you. See you tomorrow.